Shamanic initiation? Question mark.
Man, is it? Whoa,
Yeah,
buddy.
forget about it.
Yeah, did you have any, you want me to jump start it or
Jump
kick
started.
start
I
it?
don't know.
All
I
right, I'll
don't even
jump.
know what that means. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. Um, okay, actually, the whole hour of what we just talked about, we talked about this new ability, this new gift that Amy Adams, Louise Banks,
Let's just
her
say Amy
character,
Adams because
yeah,
it works.
nobody, yeah, that so we were talking about this. She was given this gift, this new ability to see the world in a different way, and that the whole process she goes through is sort of an extended shamanic initiation because she used to think about the world and exist in the world in a specific mode. Before that, she's resigned. She's gifted with languages. She's worked really hard at getting good at understanding them, but she's only understanding things in a linear way. And uh, she basically, with she much like the shamans of the past, she ascends into the spacecraft literally to commune with the aliens, which are gods in a sense. And after her communion with them and teaching, she comes back to Earth with new powers.
Right. Very
So there's the
symbolic.
shamanic initiation overlap. And I mean, we can talk we could talk a little bit more about that and bring in a little bit about the shape of the spaceship and sort of the design of it.
Yeah, if you
Because
feel that there's a those two things belong together. Yeah, sure.
yeah, I do. So how do what are some other things we can see in the movie that complete the idea that this is a shamanic initiation and or some type of initiation ceremony or process? So if we look at the ship, they have
Ships,
to,
they all look identical. 12 ships, they all look the same.
yeah, they're like this obsidian stone kind of
Not
material.
obsidian. They're more granular than obsidian. Obsidian is kind of shiny and somewhat
Okay,
trans. It's not
it's more
totally
opaque.
opaque. It's not totally opaque, but they're it's like glass, right? This is sort of a this has a
Granite.
and that's not that either. It's almost like it's definitely stone like, rock like,
Okay.
but at the same time imperfect and
Mhm.
has texture, more texture than more like a carbon fiber style of texture rather than a sort of a
Mhm.
rocky obsidian style of texture. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely has a. Well, one thing I thought is if this thing were flying through space, then it would be smooth as glass. But when they're touching it, it's not. It has a little bit more of a rock feel to it. But when you see it actually travel, it just sort of dissolves. It doesn't really shoot off like the Millennium Falcon or the Starship
Yeah.
Enterprise. So it doesn't have to travel through space. It sort of dissolves and I don't know jumps or something. But
Probably jumping,
um,
yeah. Warping
so
space.
it seems like with the design of the spaceship in connection with the idea of initiation is there's two things going on. In the past, do you remember reading about the ziggurats
Mm-hmm.
in primitive mythology? So in the ziggurat structure, all of these ancient cultures
I
built
smoked a
these,
ziggurat this morning. No.
and now you're drinking. It's a downward slide. Um, so with the ziggurat, you basically got this four-cornered pyramid type of structure, and then at the top, you've got this little pinnacle. And the idea is that the priests in these cultures that built these ziggurats that look like pyramids, they would
More steppy though, right?
ascend. Yeah, yeah, they're not smooth like a pyramid, but they're
They were
stepped.
they were precursors to pyramids, right? They
Yeah,
were in Mesopotamia,
yeah.
earliest
Mesopotamia,
civilizations.
Fertile Crescent, and then if you think of uh, the the pyramids in say Central and South America with the stepped kind of stuff, like in the fountain,
Yeah.
it's more
Ziggurat,
of
yeah.
that idea. You ascend to that meeting house to commune with the gods because that point is the meeting point between heaven and earth. And so that's sort of the ascension idea. But then we also have the idea of descent or a dissension in the sense that in France and northern Spain, you had these initiation caves that the young people would go through, and they would go into this space to have some sort of um, receiving of knowledge, this change in their psyche, and then they would re-emerge from the cave changed. All right. So we've
through
got
a narrow passageway.
just like a birth, just like a rebirth.
Yeah.
So here we have Amy Adams ascending to commune with the gods to gain new powers, like in a shamanic initiation. And then in another sense, we have her descending into a cave to receive new knowledge. So we have this sort of marriage of ideas and illustration of the idea of initiation. And also, it looks like a birth canal, essentially. Sort of the design of the ship, they have to go through this long hallway,
Right.
and then they enter the cavern like a womb. So they're re-entering the womb to have a second birth, kind of like a rebirth to come out new.
With a light at the end of the tunnel, either side.
Yeah.
The caves in France.
Lascaux and Dordogne.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Dordogne.
Dordogne and Lascaux, right? In Masks of God. Is
Altamira in Spain. Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, hard to move through. The passageways are hard to move through because they're so narrow. But they're intentionally narrow and hard to move through because the craftsmanship at the other end, when the passageway opens up into the large room, makes it obvious that, okay, well, they could have, just carved this as a giant open cavern, but decided not to for symbolic reasons. You pass through this narrow passageway and open into a space that's different from the world that you came from, fundamentally different. It's separate. It's the space where the divine lives, or it's the space where knowledge is revealed. It's this completely unique space that is somehow separate from the world, and this large wide screen that's solid white, and these giant hand-like creatures who share their knowledge with their squid ink in their writing system, almost shepherd you into this experience. They talk about how they open up the door every 18 hours. They flood the chamber with oxygen so that it's breathable. They make it a suitable environment. The fascinating thing then to me is, let's imagine that the caverns in France were not carved by mortals, but were carved by actual gods or actual divine characters, and they were carving out these spaces to sort of allow these more primitive mere humans to have this sort of handhold or ramp to this profound experience, as though if you throw a frog in hot water, it'll jump out, but if you put a frog in water and slowly turn up the heat, it'll get cooked, and it'll never jump out because it didn't notice any discrete jumps. So in a way, I wonder if sort of the passageway in France is sort of meant to acclimate you to this coming experience that would, if you were just suddenly pushed into it, would just blow your mind, right? And in the same way, I wonder if I'm just trying to think about the thought process of these fundamentally different aliens. They're far beyond us in terms of their mental capacities. They live in the realm where they can see the future and the past. They have this pictorial language, this writing system that allows them to express complex ideas in a very limited form factor to express these complex ideas that move forward and backward in time and sort of show how their brains work. And so I wonder then what the meeting before they came to the earth. All right, we don't want to blow their brains out of their butts, so we have to do this in the right way. So why don't we go to 12 different places? Yes, that's a good idea. Good one, Abbott. Nice idea. Love it.
They'll get it.
Costello, what do you think? Well, if it were me, I think we could have these sort of long passageway to sort of get them used to it. We can have the gravity flip, and they have sort of a little adventure there, and they think, ooh, this is weird, and then they slowly acclimate. And then we make them teach us. We make them teach us their language. Oh, that's a good idea. Then they think they're sort of in charge of this sort of exchange, and they think that they're the ones who are making it happen, as it were, and we'll kind of just play along, and we'll be the ones who are kind of kid-like so that it doesn't blow their minds. Because if they had come in and just sort of beamed the knowledge into our brains, then something would have gone wrong. And so I think this comes up a lot in Star Trek. How do you acclimate, not lower life forms, but how do you acclimate inferior minds to an initiation experience where they're going to receive greater knowledge?
So do you think that Abbott and Costello were totally baked when they were coming up with those ideas?
I got it. A screen. Abbott, a screen. Whoa. Okay, what's the aspect ratio? We're going to do 21:9. All right.
Yeah.
I can dig it.
Because that room they're in is full of smoke.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. That's probably just DMT gas that they've got in there.
If they weren't named
tripping.
If they weren't named Abbott Costello, they could have been named Cheech and Chong. So,
but that
do you know Cheech and Chong?
Yes, I mean I know what they represent. Okay. I know who they are.
Well,
but
I did have sort of an answer for the initiation thing.
Yeah.
God, excuse me. So
Coffee Cofferson over here.
Yeah, no, let me get some water. Perfect synchronization.
Yeah.
So if you think about any ritual, there's a lot of pomp and circumstance going on, because in a ritual, there's a level of you're preparing your mind, like taking communion at church. I mean, that's one that, I can relate to, having grown up in church. And so there's a whole process before it where you're sort of getting into the mindset for that ritual. And then you have priests or pastors or whatever, they come out and they're dressed a certain way for that ritual. And that happens. I mean, you can pick a festival, a culture anywhere in the world, and kind of see the same thing where people are spending time preparing their minds to participate in this ritual, which can sometimes include masks, costumes, different types of robes and garments. So in the movie, what happens? We've got that period of preparing to go have this religious experience, because they're even putting on priestly garments, in a sense of they're putting on hazmat suits in preparation to deal with this great knowledge or great presence they're about to interact with. Because their idea was, okay, we don't know if the power or if the biology or microbiology in that chamber is going to eat us alive, so we have to prepare to interact with this.
Right. I see what you're doing. I see what you're saying there. But I think I was looking at it from another angle. I was looking at it from the angle of Abbott and Costello, or the aliens who have come here to share something with us, that you have to have a bedrock of maybe mental readiness before the knowledge can be passed on. So they have to go through the process of, for example, the Chinese teaching them Mahjong. They learn that as a way for the aliens to initiate the humans. It's not the humans who are initiating the aliens so that the aliens can share whatever they want to share. That's not what's happening. The aliens are allowing the humans to teach them something, to sort of allow them to reach more of an equilibrium state where they feel kind of comfortable. It's our daily routine. We go into the big room and we try to communicate with them. All right, we're at sort of level 1 now. Let's bump it up a level, and that allows them to sort of slowly acclimate to, even when they do share that knowledge with her, they send the pod down and they grab her. It just about I don't know if it kills her or it causes a nervous breakdown, but it's almost too much for her to take. And she's the only one among all the sites that was able to receive the knowledge, right? And so I think it's more like them acclimating us rather than us acclimating. I think there's something else going on with the hazmat suits. It's more of they say in the movie, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, when you're a human who's from Western civilization, everything looks like a colonizer, because that's what you do. And so that's what it must be. So hazmat suits, caution, instead of taking risks. And notice that the thing that finally allows for success is the giant risk. The caution, the care, everything is sort of, we have to have these suits, we have to maybe try to guess what's going on with the other nations. People are sort of losing their minds with paranoia and nervousness. And it's the two acts of stupid craziness that actually result in steps forward. The first being when she first takes off her hazmat suit and is like, fuck it. And then the second time when they send the pod down to her because they have that rapport, right?
Yeah. And I just wanted to draw the parallels between religious sort of, we're talking about initiation and that kind of stuff and gods and human beings. And it seems like there's a parallel with like putting on the garments. And speaking of putting on the garments, it seems like, in a sense, they're also knights. And they have pages that help them get dressed to put on their armor to go do a deed. And then when they come back from doing the knightly deeds, they have pages that kind of help them take it off, which then ties into the idea of Parzival and the two things you just mentioned, the two deeds that she does bravely to make progress happen. So in the story of Parzival, when he gets to the Grail Castle the first time, he fails the test of actually, when he goes to the Grail Castle, what he's supposed to do is pass this test so that the landscape is renewed, because it's a wasteland kind of motif going on. And so what he's supposed to do is ask the Grail King, hey, what's wrong with you? Because the Grail King, when he's in the castle, there's this big celebration, and the Grail King comes out. He's on this litter because he's infirmed. He was pierced through his genitals with a lance, and so he's impotent. He can't take care of the land. He can't be a king and rule, and that's the idea. He's sort of impotent. So Parzival is supposed to see the king and then ask, what's wrong with you? But because of his training, the first time he's in the castle, he doesn't ask that question, that simple thing he was supposed to do. And he doesn't ask it because he's been taught not to, because knights don't ask unnecessary questions. They don't break decorum. So in Arrival, Amy Adams is Parzival in the sense that she goes in and she actually does break decorum. She takes off her suit. She's not supposed to take that off. That's a dangerous thing. But she knows that in order to make progress, to renew the broken land, she ditches decorum, takes off the suit, and asks a question. So, and then on top of that, Parzival means pierce the veil. All right. And so what does Amy Adams do? She pierces the veil, and that veil is that screen that's between her and the aliens, between her and gaining that knowledge. And because she's brave, she pierces the veil and she gets the universal language as a reward. And then she comes out and renews the land, unifies the planet essentially with the universal language.
Also kind of the classic hero's journey. She has to be the one to break from the status quo and bring something back from it. So the status quo is this military base, which it looks little and tiny compared to this giant ship that's sort of over the landscape, this tiny little base where these little humans are trying to protect themselves from the possible dangers that might be in the ship, that could be, and of course precautions are good, but it's the status quo. Again, going back to this book I'm reading now called it's called Alchemy. It's about advertising, but it's a little bit more than that. It's pretty interesting. But there's this idea about the only things that really succeed are the ones that sort of thumb their nose originally at the spreadsheet people. The ones that say, you're spreadsheet people, you can't come up with an innovation. There's actually a $5 way to do what you're trying to do with $1 million, and it looks insane to you, but in 10 years, you spreadsheet people are going to be the ones doing what I'm doing right now, and I'm going to be another 5 years ahead of you by that time because I'm the crazy one, right? So that's sort of the same idea. She exists in this place where there's caution all around her, where everything looks like a nail because military. It's a military base. It's always a military base, and so
Order,
there's the
procedure.
status quo, there's the procedure, there's the all of these things in place. But because she's not totally in the system, because she is the weird outsider, she's able to more easily throw it off than if they had an expert linguist there who was in the military. That person would have probably followed protocol. Right. That person wouldn't have been able to break from it. And she had clearance before, but she wasn't actually in the military. And so that allows her the sort of the flexibility to just suddenly leap left and do something unexpected that isn't what she's supposed to do.
So there were a couple of, to add to that point, and about her being a little bit of an agent of chaos or creativity.
Right.
So we've got the idea of the military as hierarchy and structure and order and conservative progress, and then she is a little bit more chaotic because she doesn't do things according to procedure. She's always having these cool new ideas about how to talk with the aliens and learn and establish connections. And it seems like on the one hand you've got this that again sort of the masculine hierarchy, kind of like we talked about in True Detective, the masculine hierarchy, civilization, consciousness, known universe, and then as an antithesis to create progress, you've got the more chaotic, flat but interconnected approach, which is her, because she looks at languages not as a hierarchy, but she looks at them. I mean, I'm sure she understands hierarchies in language, but she sees more of interconnectedness amongst people. I mean, that's her job, is to translate, help people understand one another. So there's sort of this flat interconnectedness rather than as opposed to the hierarchy of the military. And I think that also comes through with when she asks Weber to ask Danvers, at the other linguist they were going to hire, ask him what the Sanskrit word for war means. And when the military guy comes back, he asks her, what does it mean? And she says that it means a desire for more cows. But the other guy has said it means an act of aggression. So there seems like this, her answer feels more interconnected. It feels more like there's an exchange. And the other one,
there's a greater depth. There's a more universal meaning under it, maybe.
Yeah. And you have to connect. If you're going to achieve a desire, it seems like there's a level of, I just got the sense that her ideas were more attached to the scheme of interconnectedness,
right?
Whereas as opposed to the hierarchy and top-down structure of the military and the other linguists, because his was an act of war. Okay, military aggression, defense, but a hierarchy.